Welcome to the Skeptic's Guide to Investing with Steve Davenport and Clem Miller. Every 2 weeks, Steve and Clem bring you brief investment insights you may not find anywhere else. We hope you enjoy today's episode. Here are Steve and Clem.
Welcome, everyone, to Skeptic's Guide to Investing. And here, Clem Miller and I, Steve Davenport, have a special guest today, Frazer Rice. Frazer is a former colleague of ours from Willington Trust. He's a published author with the book Wealth Actually, and he has a dynamic podcast which we recommend to all our listeners, Wealth Actually. So we're happy to have Frazer here today because we think there's a lot of issues that are going to be involved in how we plan and think about our investments and what the tax regime might be under a Harris or a Trump administration. And I don't think there's a lot of clarity as we listened to the debate last night. I think it probably raised more questions than it answered. It was a battle of personalities versus policies. So in my mind, it was, probably a win for Harris. But I think that she also left a little light on the facts and information about her administration and how she'd be different than Biden. I'm going to go to the other two now and ask them what their opinions are. So, Frazer, what do you think of the debate and the general environment now? And how do you feel a 1, 2, or 3% lead by Harris? Is that enough to bring the Electoral College, or does she need more?
Short strokes, I think she needs more. I think the debate essentially was, in a sense, trying to target 100,000 people who are, quote unquote, undecided. I think if you went in pro-Trump or pro-Harris, the debate did nothing to change your mind on that. If you went in there to
We lost him.
There he is.
Hey, you're back.
I'm back. You want me to start over again?
We went into the debate with an opinion on one way or the other. You probably didn't change your opinion, but you were talking about the undecided.
Yeah, so essentially, I think that if you went in, you didn't have your mind changed. I think that from Trump's perspective, if he thought he was going to chip away at any of the undecideds, I don't think he really accomplished much on that front. I think that the Kamala Harris, she had a lot to gain on that front as far as trying to build credibility as to what the leadership of the country would look like under her. Did she provide any real clarity as far as policy is concerned? Not really. But I think she performed better from an entertainment / stability credibility factor than Trump did. And so that's worth something. And I think ultimately, again, we're looking at 100,000 people in a few states, in a few counties within those states that are going to change things. I think almost as seismic as the debate itself might be Taylor Swift's endorsement of Kamala. I think that could be worth 10,000 votes right there. And taken all together, I think that may move Harris from a 1% or 2% advantage somewhere on that front. When we sort of look at it, it's all electoral college based. Whether you get another million votes in New York or Los Angeles or anything like that, I don't think that makes any difference. I'm not sure it really does much on that front. I think also the news cycle is so short that the debate will be forgotten within a week. We've already gone past, one of the candidates going away, and then an assassination attempt, and that's way in the rearview mirror. And I think we're at the point where the debate will be old news within a week. So I think it gives Harris a slight bump, but not enough to really propel her to anything she can rely on.
How do you feel about it, Clem?
Well, I think we're seeing a continued deterioration of Trump's position in the election. I think in a prior podcast episode, we talked about, or I mentioned that I thought that Trump's peak everybody talks about peak oil. I think peak Trump was on the first day of the Republican convention, right after he was shot, and on the day that he had his Florida trial at least temporarily thrown out. I think that was peak Trump. And since then, I think the momentum has shifted dramatically towards Kamala Harris. I think in the debate itself last night, I think that that only will accelerate the trend. I think that it was very light on policy. I don't think, if you wanted to learn a lot about policy, you certainly didn't learn it last night. I think these debates are pretty much all about entertainment rather than policy. And, in prior debates, the entertainment premium or factor always would go to Trump. I think last night it was Kamala through her precision attacks, her smart bombs, so to speak, dropped on Trump. I think she was the entertainment. And I think, anybody except maybe some Trump people would realize that, she had the edge on the entertainment factor.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting after the two VP candidates came on. I mean, I didn't know Walt's face could get that red. He looks like a strawberry when you get on there, and he's got so much animation. I was just a little bit, and then JD Vance had what he wanted to say, and he wasn't going to listen to anybody or anything. He's just going to say it. Do you think the VP discussions and debate will move the needle one way or the other, Fraser?
Basically, no. I think they confirm everybody's priors as far as the presidential candidates go, and so I don't really view them as adding much in terms of changing anybody's decision making process. If you were hardened against Trump, JD Vance does nothing to swing you away from that, and if you were hardened against Kamala Harris, then Waltz doesn't do anything on that front either.
What do you think?
Totally. I agree with Fraser. It's, the vice presidential aspect of this, all it tells you is a little bit about the decision-making capability of the presidential contenders. That's all it tells you.
Yeah.
And I think that, I think it does tell us something about that.
What do we think about, at the end of the debate, Kamala coming back and saying she wants another debate? Do you think the other debate will happen? Do you think it helps, hurts, or, I mean, I would think after her performance, it was pretty good. Why would you set yourself up for a situation where you could expose yourself to, not as good a performance, I guess? Or is her confidence so high that
her confidence is so high coming out of that thing that she expects that she would win a second debate.
What do you think, Fraser? Another debate needed? Another debate wanted? Do we need that entertainment value?
Does America need it? Probably not. I think
a reality show? Would you replace it with a reality show? I don't know. I thought that when we look at these people and we see them on TV, I think it's interesting how different they are every time we do this. It's like the debate in June felt nothing like the debate last night. And I think if we had another one in a month, I think it would feel even more different, because I think that people are getting out there and learning about the candidates. And as they learn, they have questions. And I think it would be a good thing to have more one-on-one discussion, because I have this idealistic belief that an actual discussion of policy will break out accidentally if we give it enough opportunities. What do you think?
I don't think there's any fear of that.
Will policy break out?
I don't think so, Fraser.
I don't think so either. To get back to, I think Kamala would like another debate. I think having one space would help her.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that
To
it was
do anything
Philadelphia.
debate wise.
It's such a key state.
I mean, they have enough. They have so much trouble agreeing on the rules that by the time you get done with that, it just doesn't work. But yeah, no, I think that does America need another debate on that front? I doubt it. Tactically, it'd probably be good for Kamala. From Trump's perspective, I think he has to try to win, quote unquote, undecideds one at a time at this point, and he's better off doing that barnstorming.
We'll be right back.
We hope you're enjoying our episodes. If you are, then we'd greatly appreciate your liking, following, and sharing. Help us help others. Now let's get back to the discussion.
Yeah, I think that the fact that they know the districts and people's, they can see where money's coming in from. They can see, the tracking online of information and for these people. I got to imagine if the technology helped in 2016 and 2020, I mean, today I got to imagine it's even more detailed and even more granular in terms of who they need to affect and who they need to influence. That maybe they got people knocking door to door, making the calls. So it's scary to think about how much if you can be targeted so easily on Facebook or any social platform, these people who are unsure, I mean, they must be either completely detached in the mountains or they just don't log in, because otherwise people would be knocking on their door and going after them, right?
Well, the one thing I would say is that if you're a fan of Kamala and you don't know exactly what she stands for on things like taxes or whether she supports nuclear, which I don't know what she does or doesn't on that front, she had to address the fracking issue with Pennsylvania. There are certain issues there that I think there are still a lot of uncertainties with Kamala, even if you follow this stuff, which I do, that she didn't address with the debate. And I don't think she's really addressed with her campaign rollout at the moment, and didn't have to address by not being part of the primary component either. And so that's why I think any chance she can get out in a controlled setting and deal with those issues, maybe in contrast to Trump or sort of in a way that antagonizes him, I think that augurs well for her if she were to chip away and try to get more undecideds as they find different issues that are important to them.
Right. I believe that it's the economy, stupid. And so I believe that there's a lot of people that will be asking the question, do you feel better than you were 4 years ago? And I think that answer is probably no for a lot of those people in the middle who are trying to decide and make up their minds. So I feel like she has to come with some fresh ideas on the economic front in order to separate herself from the Biden, inflation. And was this Biden inflation caused by the Fed being slow to act and raise rates? Absolutely. Was it any fault of the president and vice president? Probably not a lot. But that's the role. If you're the president, you get to take all the blame or all the credit, right? And I think that ultimately the economics of the country are going to drive some of these voting. I think some of these ancillary issues, they're nice if everything else is going great, but I'm not sure that everything is going great for a lot of people in this country right now. So I'm a little bit concerned that in sliding by some of these issues, I think she missed a chance to kind of be more of this person who she talks about cares about people and is kind to people, and we try to operate in a better and different way. I mean, do you two see this election changing in terms of being less bitter and less, insults and daggers thrown, or do you see it just coming down to whoever is going to shout the largest and interrupt the questioner? I thought that Trump did an unbelievable job at every question. He had to have the last point. Even though there was no order, there was no mics on or off. It felt to me like these rules that they spent weeks arguing about didn't get followed anyway. So what did it matter how we set up the rules? How did you find the environment, Clem?
You threw out a lot just now. So I would say that, let me ask you, when you say environment, what are you referring to exactly? The debate itself, or just the environment, yes. The debate?
The debate itself, and how they listen to the instructions and they listen to the feedback from the
ABC made it clear. ABC made it clear that they would reserve the right to turn off the mics. And even though it was part of the rules that the mics would be turned off, right? So they said they'd reserve the right, and indeed they did turn off the mics. And I think for anybody who was sort of pro Kamala, there was this kind of impression that ABC was maybe being too lenient towards Trump in terms of allowing him to talk and to talk and to talk, right? Indeed, during apparently the first, I saw some of the calculations as to who spoke and who didn't speak. First half of the debate, Trump spoke a lot more than Kamala did. And in the second half, it was actually the opposite, which I thought was interesting, because when I listened to it, it sounded like Trump was talking, was saying a lot more than Kamala on all the different questions. But I think ABC actually did the right. I think they did the right thing. I think ABC did the right thing in allowing Trump to talk, because, it gave him the opportunity to either, say something good or say something that people would think was crazy. And so they gave him that opportunity to do that. I think that ABC also did the right thing in allowing Trump, letting him lie, but at the same time fact checking him when he did lie, at least on some of the lies. So I thought that was good. So, on those things, all Harris had to do was sort of sit back and, strike a pose, which she did on some of those questions, putting her chin in her hand and sort of, laughing a little bit, smiling, like, what am I hearing here? Those were the things that in my mind were entertaining. The way she reacted to a lot of what Trump was saying was entertaining. And I think a lot of people in this split screen approach realized that she was just, enjoying herself at Trump's expense. That's the way I saw the debate itself going down, even though I didn't think there was a lot of substance to it.
What did you think, Fraser?
As a general matter, I got tired of watching it, so the entertainment factor didn't really work, and I sort of put myself in the shoes of amateur political consultant and said, okay, what would I be doing, telling these candidates on the front how they, what should they focus on? If I'm Trump, I focus on three things. Number one, the economy. As you said, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And I think people will look at higher prices and the struggle that it is to exist in America versus what it was before. Number two, I think the migrant crisis, I think painting Kamala in a box on that front is another big part of it. And then I guess at the third level, not that it really matters that much, but do you feel safer now in this environment than from a foreign policy perspective as it relates to, was the exit from Afghanistan orderly? Are we doing the right things in the Middle East? Are we doing the right things in the Ukraine? Is that the right hand you want on the steering wheel going forward? If I'm Kamala, I kind of do what I kept doing. I think her appeal to women can only have a higher ceiling, as she talks about, her stance on abortion and really is bringing logic into that framework. I think she's got a good story to tell on that. I think she has a story to tell on the economy. I think she has to do a much better job at reestablishing the narrative around a pro-growth economic set of ideas. I think right now she is painted in the box of Biden's tax policies, and people are going back, and she's not really portraying sort of an optimistic future beyond sort of what I guess probably simplistically calling it sort of a giveaway culture. I would lean into the fact that Silicon Valley is a big part of California and a big driver of what's going on in this country as far as economic growth. And she's not been comfortable doing that.
Yeah, I think it's amazing what didn't get talked about, right? I really don't think we talked about China at all, given the amount of influence it has, on this Taiwan Straits and just in general worldwide, and their influence in their, roads policy. It kind of left me a little bit like this is really a discussion about a few issues. And then when they waste time, I, like you, get very frustrated listening, because I'm like, this is just nonsense. We're talking about, the size of your rally. I've never heard that as, the way that you measure success is how many people you get at the rally. I mean, if you bring enough food and you bring enough things, you will have enough people. I don't think it really is this statement that you have 35 and I have 32 and you're bigger and better than I am. So I find the way that we do things in our politics is as frustrating as the ultimate result. If we don't do a good job of holding people accountable, telling them to stop, turning their mic off and saying, answer the question, yes or no, I think we don't really get to the heart of what are the differences between these two people. I thought one of the people might say, yeah, all of our economic policies involve giving people money, giving people a tax break for a startup, giving people money if they have a child, giving people money if they buy a house. It seemed to like, how do we have more policies of giving money away? Is it going to be easier next year than it was this year? Why couldn't we give people $25,000? My daughter just bought a house. It would have been great. I would have really appreciated that. Why are we waiting till next year? And I think that the degree of detail that we discuss things is still at such a high level. I find that sometimes we get away with a person gives us any insight, we take that as policy, when in reality, like when they press Trump for what is your policy on improving healthcare, well, it's a concept right now. I mean, all these things are concepts. I mean, there's no bills waiting to be filed when Harris becomes president. So I think that we're just our expectations are so low for these politicians, and it just leads to a lower level dialogue. I'm maybe unrealistic, and you can tell me that, but I'd just like the dialogue to be just a little more, less 8th grade and more 12th grade. Just move up a few years, What do you think, Clem?
Well, I mean, I think it would be great if we could up the level of policy discussion. I think that, we don't really get much from the entertainment value of the whole thing. I think if, it could be the nature of the questions. The questions were, sort of phrased in a way that, they were sort of aimed at, the questions themselves were sort of 8th grade. And so when you do 8th grade questions, you're going to get 8th grade answers. But if the questions, if the questions were 12th grade questions,
ABC could have done a better job.
Yeah, if the questions had been 12th grade questions, then I think there would have been, there could have been more sophisticated
accidents happen. I mean,
neither candidate is going to go out in any great level of detail on policy. I think we may be waiting for Godot on that one.
All right. What do we think about? Let's just take a little tack change here. I think that if we look at the two candidates, Trump is probably going to be less regulation, and Harris would probably be a little more regulation, just in general, to characterize the two positions. But what do we think is happening with going on with Google and some of the Magnificent Seven in terms of how we as a country are treating them versus how Europe and China and the rest of the world is from a regulatory standpoint? Is America still the home of the free and the brave, or are we becoming Europeanized? What do you think, Clem?
Well, so I think Europe has gone quite far down the road of regulating Apple, Google, Meta, Tesla. I mean, not Tesla, but X and some other companies in terms of their monopoly presence in digital markets. The US is quite far behind that. I think the US is ultimately going to be forced to move in the direction that Europe has been moving. Europe, they first came out with their general data protection regulations, GDPR, which was aimed at data, not just at data privacy, but at data localization. That is, keeping data generated in Europe on servers in Europe. China does the same thing. Then Europe moved to a Digital Markets Act, where basically it's an antitrust act that was crafted just for the U.S. and some Chinese mega cap companies. And then the last one was the so-called Digital Services Act, which actually requires a certain degree of content moderation. And actually, X has just gotten in trouble for violating provisions of the Digital Services Act. So, we're going down this road of greater regulation of the mega cap tech companies. I think that's responsible for some of the volatility we've seen in their stock prices. It's not just valuation. It's these uncertainties about their regulatory future. And because the European laws apply to these companies through the principle of extraterritoriality, I think the U.S. is necessarily going to have to find a way to to manage its own regulation so that it doesn't diverge too far from European regulations. That means that the large tech companies in the United States are going to be increasingly regulated along a number of different fronts.
What do you think, Fraser?
Nothing I can really disagree with there. I do think that either candidate, whether Trump or Harris, is going to sort of look at what the tech companies are bringing as far as job creation and wealth creation, et cetera. And, I think there will be some common sense applied to the regulatory scheme so that we're not sort of leapfrogging over the Europeans or, dealing with China or anything like that. Ultimately, our wealth creation is an export, and to kill the golden goose, I think, is something that's you're not going to score political points doing that. Now, does that mean that they're going to take a, sort of not cause, breaking up Google or something like that? Uncertain. But I think that once we get past the election and once you sort of look at, the framework of what the economy does and doesn't do in the context of what's out there in the rest of the world, I I think a combination of the lobbyists of the firms, I think the business groups of the firms, the tech groups, I think they're going to get smarter as far as educating the political component of this country about what is special about the wealth creation in the tech space, and to start, firing arrows at it for political gain. We'll see what happens. Now, does that mean that they should not have content controls over, going after younger kids or sort of immoral situations, or if there's market power issues, something? No, but I think the balance, I'm not as worried about it being a huge overreach. And that's not to say that there aren't going to be measures taken, that there isn't going to be a lot of noise around it, but antitrust law in particular is a long winding road that usually ends in some sort of settlement. And I kind of think that's what's going to happen on these fronts, not least of which, these firms could get competed away very quickly. I mean, the next Bitcoin may be around the corner. Light-based microprocessors may be around the corner, and all of a sudden, NVIDIA is not as amazing as it was before. Who knows? And so, if you take a snapshot in time around competitive advantage and regulation and things like that, it's tough to extrapolate from that, because the innovation oftentimes comes from places we don't even see it.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting today. I looked at the why that NVIDIA was doing well, and I got they announced that they approval for some chips to be sent to Saudi Arabia. And we think about everything that's competing here in the US, but if you start to think about how you could impact, their position in technology within the Middle East, there's all of these sub-universes that these people are operating in that I think make it, how we distribute technology, how we allow the distribution of technology, how we help people to move their societies and economies along is as important as how we operate here back in the US. I'm not sure we understand how much of a benefit, like you mentioned once about Silicon Valley being where the golden goose is. I don't think we realize how being in the front of most of these technologies, especially AI, is a huge, huge influencer of the US economy. And if we start thinking more about regulatory and stop thinking more about innovation, I think we do have a risk of being surpassed by some of the Chinese and other competitors in these spaces. So how do we make sure that the next 4 years are going to be us continuing to lead? Just as an example, as I got done with the debate, I was talking to my wife and I said, "What did you think of it?" She says, "I don't know, but there's a really good AI out there from Melania where she's saying these things, and it's just so funny." And I think about, like, 4 years ago, we weren't talking about memes from AI that looked perfect and sounded perfect and were artificially created with all of the tools that have existed now for 4 years ago. So I have no idea how it's amazing to me. We have more and more technology, but we still have paper ballots in most states. So how does this all come together? If we have this great technology, we have this ability to understand AI, are we using it on the right things, or are we using it on the wrong things? What do you think, Clem?
Well, I happen to think, and I think a lot of people think this, that paper ballots, are a paper trail, let's call it, right? And it's not necessarily a paper ballot, but a paper trail is actually a good thing, right? In our elections. So I think that, I would put that in the category of something where, electronics is good, and the combination of electronics and paper is even better, right? Paper record. I think AI has a lot of dangers in it, and I think that it's going to be subject to regulation, and I do think that there will be a lot, to Fraser's point, a lot of innovation that will take us, 2, 3, 4, 5 miles down the road from where we are now. It's not going to look 5 years from now. AI and tech in general is not going to look, the way it does now. Just like today, what we're seeing with the integration of AI into a lot of the search engines, a lot of the social media. We couldn't have envisioned that just 3 or 4 years ago, before OpenAI came out. And now we're seeing that. So, AI is, I think, I've mentioned this before on this podcast. I believe AI is a real thing. There was some doubt about that at one point, right? Is AI a real thing? I think most people realize now that AI is a real thing, that AI is in some respects a game changer, that AI has a strong future to it. Doesn't necessarily mean that the stocks that are involved in AI are all going to be great stocks. Not suggesting that we invest top down in AI, but AI is certainly something that is a theme that I think is one to explore when it comes to looking at individual stocks on a bottom up basis. So yeah, I think AI is something that is really an investment theme that we really need to stay on top of. But it is subject to regulation. It's real. It's unlike Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin, in my mind at least, is not real, right? And while it's an investment theme, it's not something that I go chasing around. AI is something that's very real and has to be on our radar screens. Just like the weight loss drugs, for example, that's a real thing too, and needs to be on investors' radar screens.
Yeah, Fraser, when you look at this regulation and the pursuit of these companies, I feel a little bit like we're chasing the horse that is already out of the stable. That these companies have already taken over these markets and taken over their presence there, and that their lawyers and their situation, they're way ahead of the regulators. So I'm looking at this saying, we're trying to figure out how Google might be managed or controlled or regulated. And in reality, we've got this next thing, AI, that is going to be 10 times as complicated and much more difficult. And we haven't figured out how to, control people getting ads information and location information for individuals. It's like in my mind, we're pretty far behind in the social aspect of these technologies, and we're going to get further behind. Do you feel like there's, some rhyme and reason to what the government's going to do with these to get a solution that's going to be better?
I think they're a huge topic, but I would say there's a couple shreds of optimism. I think the first one is that with these tools, as they become more and more democratized and get in the hands of more and more people, I think that creates more and more offshoots there. That also creates the potential for more market power and control. But I am more optimistic on that front, and I think that a steady hand at the federal level in terms of regulating on that is possible. An interesting case from the Supreme Court is one called Loper Bright, which essentially said that courts can take over and render decisions on ambiguous laws. And so in a sense, the administrative state could be a little bit more democratized as well for those people who feel like that if they feel like that there's been regulatory capture by large groups, et cetera, they can go and sue in one of a bunch of different venues in order to sort of attack a rule that maybe have been put in place at the behest of somebody larger or more centralized. And so I look at that, the case just came out basically 3 weeks ago. So who knows what the impact of that is, but essentially, the decentralization of the administrative state, I think, opens up possibilities to attack sort of the Death Star of the monoliths that are out there on a piecemeal basis. Now, you could go and say, well, those people aren't necessarily resourced well enough to be able to fight in federal court with loose litigation dollars, whereas Google and Meta and all that have just these huge war chests. That's the balance to be struck. I think that the shift in arena where these fights are going to take place is something that, as an investment theme, I think that's something that the analysts out there are going to have to really understand well, because I think it's new. I think it's going to have a big impact on a lot of different areas. I mean, any area where an industry touches the federal government, it's going to touch that. The Loper Bright case is probably going to be a big part of where the fights are at the forefront of legislation and how it's implemented. So long-winded way of saying that, look, AI is a big thing. AI is not perfect. There are going to be a lot of eggs broken. There's going to be a lot of different challenges related to it. But I also think that it's so imperfect, and it's going to continue to be so imperfect, that the economy and the thoughtful people around it are going to incorporate it and use it as a tool. And the people that I don't think it's something that's easily controlled. And I think that, if you even look at the entertainment industry and you start seeing, well, what happens if all the actors get thrown away and you just use likenesses or you use computer generated likenesses? That creates issues. And you end up, if all of Los Angeles becomes unemployed because of AI, you will have political ramifications to that. So I try to take a 20-year look at that and say, we are in such the early innings here, and there's so many different things going on that I'm not doom and gloom on it, and it's something that I monitor from afar.
Yeah, I remember when my kids started playing with Sims, and they created their own little, gardens and their own things, and it was like the game was very much like life. And you looked at it and you said, well, if this keeps going, we're going to have these virtual lives and these virtual games, and that's where we've gotten. And I feel like there's a opportunity here to how we think about these technologies and how we think about the regulation of them that should give us not a scary feeling, but a feeling of, this is really a future that we're going to see over and over repeated, whether it's the human genome, whether it's the peptides that is going on with the obesity drugs. We're going to see signals and understand things about life in a more microscopic manner that's going to, I think, be very exciting. It's just, in my mind, sometimes we have to, when the internet started, there was a lot of people that said, you don't want to be on it. It's crazy. It's uncontrolled. Everyone there is, it's a free range. And sure enough, as people started to get on it and people started to use it, they realized there was real advantage from sharing. So I think that sharing AI and sharing some of these things will help us. I guess I'm trying to figure out is which candidate in this election is going to put an environment in place that's going to be better for us as investors and better for us as citizens. Do we think that one, I think we probably have an inclination, but I'm not sure if the regulatory world being more active is going to create an environment that will allow our innovation to continue to grow and prosper. Do you ever worry about that, Clem?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there is a benefit to having regulation, because without regulation, businesses are not going to know what the boundaries are on where they could be sued.
Well, we already have some regulation. I mean, it's not like we're going from an environment.
No, we're not going from 0 to 100 or 100 to 0, right? I think the point that Fraser raised about the recent Supreme Court ruling is a very interesting one, because now, the shots are no longer going to be fully called by the administrative courts. which basically my understanding is are pretty much captured by the individual agencies that are doing the regulations, but now can be sorted out in federal courts. That I don't know how the federal courts are going to do that, because it could be overwhelming in terms of the volume of decisions that they have to make. But it is, it does create variety, and as Fraser pointed out, in who could be looking at these things: geographic variety, variety of political viewpoints. It sort of opens up the discussion, the regulatory discussions. I thought that was a very interesting point, Fraser, that you made on that issue. But I think that regulation isn't all bad. Regulation is good. I think that it can go too far. It really depends on the type of regulation. Certainly not regulation for regulation's sake. But that's not how, in the US, regulation, when the government puts out regulations, there have to be waiting periods, there have to be comment periods. You've got the Congress that can weigh in on regulations. Some of them don't take effect until Congress has had a chance to review. This isn't just government agencies or the White House going crazy, right? This is, there are legitimate processes by which these regulations get reviewed before they get implemented.
Well, we have been having a government by presidential edict, haven't we? I mean, the presidency has stopped going to Congress for ideas that they don't think they can get through.
You've got
come up with immigration and other ideas that are
not to some degree, right? I mean, you have executive orders. They all have to have some basis in law, right? Or else they'll be overturned, right? Although I don't know, under the new Supreme Court immunity ruling, I don't know if an executive order can be overturned. So that's something that'll have to be hammered out, I think, in the courts. But executive orders are, historically have had to be grounded in some kind of law that Congress has passed.
Yeah, I mean, if an executive is promulgating executive orders that aren't rooted in constitutional authority or legislative action, I think by extension, that's a exercise of power that goes beyond the authority of the presidency. Now, that's a complicated question depending on the world that they're in, or that the domain that they're opining on. But our political system has been pretty good for a really long time, in the sense that it did its best to try to set out checks and balances around all of these different things. And when people start sort of muling that there's too much power here, or there's too much power there, what do we do? Oh my gosh, do we the courts don't reflect this or that? The founding fathers were trying to think in 50 to 100 to 250 year cycles. And that's where we are right now. And I think, there are a lot of different scenarios. We've gotten through a civil war, 2 world wars, a depression, Vietnam, 9/11, the January 6th, to some degree, I think was a test of the government that I think it passed. And as we continue going forward, I think that everything that we're doing on that front going forward leads to sort of a good, steady direction as it relates to policy, no matter who you have in office. And so, is it to sort of tie it back to regulation? Are we in I still think that we live in a country that values hard work and innovation, and I think the political process reflects that. The people and the ideas of the parties that are around it now can be frustrating at times, but I think this is just in many ways an exercise in patience, and and in locating people that hopefully project kind of that combination of temperance and optimism and and vision that sort of gets this country back to being exceptional again. And we'll see what happens. I mean, the two people that are vying for it right now aren't communicating that. Trump is too negative and has a lot of different issues around it. Kamala, I think, tries to project positivity, but at the same time, she doesn't have the detail associated with it. Her track record creates questions as to what as the way she would get there. And that's what the voter has to kind of figure out going forward, is which of the two is going to be the right track, if not for the long term, at least for the short term.
Yeah, sometimes I think that elections are rebounds, and you go in one direction and the pendulum swings, and then we rebound and we go in another direction. And we're not necessarily going in one's the right direction and one's the wrong direction. They're just different directions. So I was going to try to wrap up today's podcast by asking each of you two questions. One, what do you think will be a positive surprise between here and the end of the year to make these markets and the future of American excellence, which is a great phrase, Fraser? I'm going to use that, exceptionalism. And what thing do we expect might happen, or worried about or concerned about, that could happen between now and the end of the year that could definitely throw things, up in the air or throw things in a more uncertain area? So it could be geographic, it could be military, it could be technology, it could be, Pfizer is looking to come out with a new drug that will be a pill versus this, for the obesity issue. So I just think there's, personally, I'm worried about something going on with China and Taiwan. I still believe that is my biggest concern as we keep getting more and more engaged in the Middle East with Hezbollah and Iran. I feel like that distraction and our moving carrier over there is not a good situation, because I still believe if we look at the forces in the world, the force of China against some of its or towards its territories, is something that we are not really prepared for, and could definitely upset this election and could upset this end of the year in the markets. I think the markets are fully priced, and I think that they're looking for a reason to become more reasonably priced. And I think that something like that with China could do that. In terms of optimism, I really think what's going on in the obesity space and what's going on with the human genome is really the future of our medicine. We know we have medically a problem with obesity in America, and we have a problem with obesity worldwide. And I think that if we can figure out how to economically produce these drugs that will help people get from the shape they're in to a better shape, and ultimately, we can start to have people, with greater medical care. I think that, my vision is that I think there will be some kind of telehealth that will be available to all, and that will look at that and say, the benefits of this are so great to our Medicare and other systems that it makes sense for the government to pay for this and get people healthy. And I believe that, this step by Pfizer with this drug is one first step in that direction, and it could have a huge impact. What would be your two things to celebrate and to be concerned about, Fraser?
So I will start with, there are many things to be concerned about. And as you said, it could be geopolitical. It could be China. It could be something blowing up with, in the Mideast. It could be, something negative happening in the Ukraine, or it could be any number of things on that front that whipsaw the attitude of this country toward, sort of a retrenchment to safety.
Isolationism.
And that type of thing I don't think is super productive. I think America works well when it is involved in the world, and we're safer when that happens. And so that's something that concerns me between now and the end of the year. Positive things, as you said, there's lots of stuff going on there. I'm trying to manifest this into reality. It's sort of like when you hit a drive into the rough, you kind of look for it where you want to find it, and hope it turns out well from there. But I desperately want to see this country have a developed nuclear policy. I just don't understand how you can be sort of a power in this world and frankly an environmentalist and someone who believes in driving economic growth and not really think that nuclear can't be a big part of that. I think energy is accomplished with a symphony of measures. I think it's everything from fossil fuels, hopefully going down over time, but then using solar and wind and hydro. But I mean, nuclear is just waiting to happen. And, the sun is in really ways the biggest fusion reactor. I would love to see some sort of advance in fusion energy all of a sudden really ignite, figuratively, not literally, the imagination of this country. And in fact, if it were me running for president, my big platform I would have a Marshall Plan for nuclear energy, because then I think if we are fully an exporter of energy going forward, that changes the geopolitical dynamics of everything, and then we're able to play to our strengths.
Would like us a little bit, wouldn't they?
Sorry,
our allies would like us a little bit more.
I guess. I don't know, but to me, if we are fully energy independent / exporting, I think I think the world looks to us again.
That's great. Clem, how about you? You want to take us home? What's going to happen?
So let me just say on the positive front, I think that, if you look not at the day-to-day volatility, if you bring yourselves above the day-to-day volatility, month-to-month volatility of the markets, I think we are seeing continued corporate earnings strength. We're not in a recession. We're not on the cusp of a recession. I think that, underlying, I know you're shaking your head. I don't think we are. I think that, we're powering through, at least in terms of markets, we're powering through because we have innovation, an innovation society. And I think we're doing well on that. And so that would be I don't think there's anything more that's needed on the positive front, right? That's going to keep us forward. Now, the big negative, right? You guys have mentioned some foreign policy potential scenarios. And I agree with every single scenario you've mentioned. I would just add one thing, and I'm going to spin out a possible negative scenario as a sort of science fiction aficionado. And that would be one where on election day this year, there's a giant cyber attack directed by Russia. Wow. I think that would be, I think if you had a giant cyber attack affecting the US elections, I think that would create so much internal chaos. There would be political conflict in the United States. It would trigger just an absolute mess. So that would be my one scenario for chaos at the end of 2024.
Couldn't agree with you more, Clem. It being 9/11 and I'm in the middle of downtown New York, I've said publicly elsewhere, we've not had the 9/11 of a cyber attack yet. And if something like that were to come to pass, that's the enormity and the wide breadth of impact that would cause. I don't think anybody's really tried to hem in what that would look like.
Yeah, I mean, an earlier attack this year was the CrowdStrike was, I think, an example of how even something that's not dangerous can turn dangerous if it's not, if something's mishandled. So I really appreciate what you guys have added today. I think it's been great. And I think we discussed some issues and some opportunities and help people think about their investment portfolios. So thank you very much, everybody. Please, where you can, share and like Wealth Actually or Skeptics Guide. And we hope to have more to give you as the year ends, and we'll hopefully be more on the optimist side and less on the dark side. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
The views shared on this podcast represent the personal investment views of the hosts. They are for educational purposes and not meant to be taken as investment advice. Listeners should consult their own investment, legal, and tax advisors. Past performance of any investments is not a guarantee for future return.